the Educational Physics Podcast.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the Educational Physics Podcast. This time, my guest was Alan Herman. Alan Herman is an American drummer, more specifically from New York, and the reason for why I wanted to speak to Alan Herman is because I've been a super fan of his work, and more importantly, the way he approaches teaching. Alan is a very methodical, focused, and almost scientific educator. Not only he knows music and the music business, but he knows exactly how to teach very complex concepts that most people struggle to explain. In this podcast, we talked about his relationship with the music business, his relationship with education, what he thinks of the state of education these days, and what he thinks of what the future is going to be. We talked about all sorts of professional and personal experiences, and I truly hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So, with no further ado, here's Alan Herman. So, we can definitely start this, and I would like to start this off by thanking you for saying yes, first and foremost. I've been following your work and your thinking, which is what was the most attractive thing for me, and still is. Whoever I'm attracted to from an intellectual standpoint is not really the flashy stuff. It's always the meat that I try to understand and somehow, add a little bit more information into my library of ideas so I can hopefully one day crack the code of what it is, this thing of teaching. Because I'm still trying to understand that myself. So
yeah. Well, I feel honored that you want to talk to me.
Well, trust me that by the end of this, the honor is going to be all mine. But I would like to ask you what the backstory is. So for everyone who doesn't know who Alan Herman is, what do they need to know?
Oh, well, I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally, and then I got into Manhattan as a teenager. I started working when I was 16, illegally in alcoholic beverage, places, bars and stuff. And I came up through playing top 40 rock and roll, and then got into recording rock and roll bands, and then I got involved with Broadway shows, and then through that I got involved with major acts, playing for major acts, and I was well trained. I started taking lessons from the first day. I was 12 years old when I started taking lessons, and at some point in high school, I talked to my high school teacher when I needed a teacher, and he put me in the direction of Julliard Prep Division. So I auditioned for Julliard Prep, and I made it. I got a scholarship to Julliard Prep and went to Julliard, and then they wanted to matriculate that into the main school when I graduated high school. But I chose not to continue my classical training because I didn't really like the classical world. I was really having a good time playing rock and roll drums. And I always was a teacher along the way. I always felt good about teaching. I like to see people's understanding lighten up. I call it the light bulb turns on. Mm-hmm. And that really gives me a kick. And the other thing about teaching that is really important to me is that, after you get to a certain point, the thrill is sort of gone of when you were first learning and everything was so new, and so for me, by teaching, I can relive all the thrills of discovery that I've been through on my own, that I can now show other people how to do that. And when they get that thrill, I can live vicariously off of the thrill that they receive from discovering stuff.
That's very interesting. I'm not That is a very interesting thought. I think about that the first time experience. Often, like when you watch a great movie and you wish that you could see it for the first time again, right? Because it's that
first time experience. The first time experience, anything is always the best one, and every time you do it after that, you're trying to recreate the original experience that you cannot ever reach again.
Yeah, you already know the plot. That's the that's I guess the issue, right? You already know how it ends. You know that someone's gonna die, and it takes away the curiosity. Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess
my teaching helps me. It helps me to relive it.
Yeah, and do you think that that via teaching, well, I think I know the answer, but do you think that via teaching you've become a better student as well?
Oh, yes. I mean, every time I teach it, I learn it better myself. There's two things that happened in my life. One is the teaching thing, is that every time I had to teach something, I had to look at it again, and I was looking at it from a longer perspective than I did the last time, with more experience. And so my teaching got better, and because the teaching got better, it affected the way I saw it, and then it affected the way I learned better. I would do the things better. And then there's several points along the way where I stopped practicing or I stopped playing, and I had to rebuild the technique. I didn't have to relearn how to read and coordination, but I mean, whenever I had to rebuild my hands because they had gone soft on me, I did a better job each time. So I found that sometimes stopping and taking a long break and then coming back and doing it again from an early stage actually is a good exercise to improve what you have.
How long was that break?
Well, the longest break I had a break from the music business. I had retired playing drums when I was 47. No, 47. I retired, and I got into computers, and I was doing data analysis for about 14 years. So, and I had stopped playing music altogether, and after a few years of that, I stopped even practicing. So it was a period of time of about a good 10 years where I didn't touch a drumstick from the time I was about 50 to 60, somewhere in there. And then in my early 60s, about 8 or 9 years ago, yeah, I'm 70 now. About 8 or 9 years ago, I decided to. What happened is that I reconnected with Billy Martin, who was a student of mine. I was his first drum teacher, and we sort of kept in touch along the way until he was about 17. Then I lost track of him, and I really didn't know what he was doing. And he was getting into a DVD project, his educational DVD for drums. And he called me up and he said he would like me to help him with it because he was camera shy. He felt funny about talking straight into the camera himself. And he had this idea of that if he could get somebody to talk to, then the conversational, like going to be a dialogue, which he would feel more comfortable with. And he asked me if I could do that with him, and I said sure. I'd be happy to talk about stuff with him. And he didn't know at the time. He didn't know that I stopped for 10 years, and also I had started practicing again for physical therapy reasons. I had a back injury, and I was in bad shape, and I needed to strengthen my back and muscle structure again. And one of the ways to do that, I decided, was to go back and start practicing again. So it was a physical therapy thing that got me back in originally. And then Billy asked me to do this DVD with him, and I wound up being the executive producer as well. And when it got time to do the taping, I did the dialogue parts with him, and then he got into doing the drum solo stuff. And he called me up I wasn't even there. He called me up from the studio because my job was over, and he asked me to come in and bring the Portraits in Rhythm book and whatever, and he asked me to come in and play for his DVD. So I did a couple of solos, and he put them on the DVD. And at that point, I realized that I should be more serious about this. If I'm going to be seen with Billy on an educational DVD, I really need to get back into teaching and really need to get my hands back together. I was leaving the corporate world anyway. I was retiring from that period of time anyway. And I had a lot of free time, and I also had pension money, so I didn't really need to make a living any longer. And so that removed a lot of the onus from me playing music, because it was a big thing for me to have to pay the bills, and it was emotionally hurtful. I mean, I would take things very personally in the business when it was hard to make money and I couldn't pay all my bills easily, or I knew other guys that were making a ton of money and they couldn't play half as well as I could. I mean, all kinds of competitive things that go on when money is involved. And I found all of that was gone now that I had left the business for 14, 15 years, and all of that anger had subsided. And then I was at the point in my life where money didn't matter anymore. It was time for me to be doing what I wanted to do for the love of doing it, not for the need of making a living. So, and I never taught for a living. I mean, I never did that. I played drums for a living because I needed to make money. But I taught all along the way, but I never developed a big following in teaching, private teaching, because I didn't want to carry a bunch of people that were hard to deal with, who didn't really want to learn. If you really weren't interested in what I was going to show you and wanted to work at it, I really didn't want to spend my time teaching. I'd rather work on myself. So I never relied on teaching for a living, and here I am at the point getting involved as an educational DVD producer and getting to be known as a teaching entity because of Billy. Because Billy's a pretty heavy teacher, and he was telling everybody that I was his first teacher, so everybody looked at me like I must be a great teacher. So it was just timing and luck that I happened to have a student like Billy. I had him when he was 12 years old. I mean, I didn't know what he was going to be. He didn't know what he was going to be, and we hooked up again later in life when he became this educator, and I was able to assist him. I helped him be an educator, and I helped him promote teaching. The latest project together was the Herman House, which he named after me. I put up a lot of the money to build his gallery. He calls it the Herman House, which is a video studio and a teaching studio and a clinic studio, and he's got artwork on the walls, and he does art as well. And that's his big project now, and so I've been involved with his major DVD thing that got us into PASIC, and we did a presentation in PASIC because of that. And now I'm involved with the Herman House Gallery, which is his major environment for his educational functions. And then we also do a camp in the summertime. We do a summer camp, sleepaway, for a week, where he invites teachers in. Him and Ciro Batista as are the two main guys. And then I did the first one with them. Second one I couldn't because I was in China, and this year I'm going to make sure I'm going to get back there in June to do the third camp with them. And it's fantastic. They get about 20 people, and they spend a week together, and everybody bonds. And they spend the whole week with the students. And the guest teachers come in for a couple of days, a day or two here and there, and there's performances every night, jam sessions, and it was really great. So and that's been the focus of my life at this point. It was just mainly, that's all I do now is teach and do educational projects. But like I said, it's very difficult to make a living doing this kind of stuff. So, as you probably understand yourself, and if you do, and you are obligated to make a living and pay a business, pay business bills, you wind up getting very frustrated with some of the students you have to deal with, because you need to keep a big set of students going all the time, and not everybody is a great student or cares as much as you do. It's a very precarious occupation as far as I'm concerned. So that's the background from playing to teaching, and that's what it is. I was never a famous player. I wasn't a famous teacher until Billy promoted me, and then I got into YouTube simply as a way to transmit my information, because I wasn't doing it one-on-one so much. I wanted to make it more generally available to drummers, and I get a lot of great feedback from the videos. I mean, there's a teacher and student in Russia who just did 3 DVDs consisting of YouTube videos that they took. They got in touch with me, asked me if it was okay, because there was no money involved. I said absolutely, but they made a 3 DVD package of my video instructions for students in Russia, and I get a lot of feedback from individual students who thank me that I've really helped them by looking at the video. Of course, as you know, one-on-one teaching is the best thing you can do. It's the most effective way of getting your potential and learning. And I get the most thrill out of the one-on-one. But I have a huge catalog of online educational videos that are free. And a lot of people have given me a lot of really good feedback that it's been very, very helpful to them, to their individual development, to have looked at those. So I'm very happy that I've had some impact that way. And I gotten a lot of students that way as well. I mean, people, some Skype students, and it's very hard to get some students to come to New York. So I do some Skype teaching, and I do some live teaching, and I continue to make videos, and I continue to collaborate with Billy on educational projects. And I'm very happy doing this and not having to worry about how much the gig pays, or who got it instead of me, and that kind of stuff.
No, I hear that. It's funny because I have a list of topics that I want to touch on, and my second one I didn't even bring it up, but we went there. The question was, how did the passion fade away? Because I know a little bit of your backstory, and the passion not for teaching, but with the music business. Because I know a little bit of your backstory, and you already explained that. But conversely, where did the passion for education come from?
That was always there. I mean, even when I was a teenager, I had only playing a couple of years, and I was taking students and teaching. There was something about teaching that always attracted me. I'm teaching English now in China. I came here, I was hoping to teach drums, but there's no, there's no network here in Shenyang where I am. The network is down in Shanghai or in Beijing. I'm not in one of the major cities. So, so there's no big network of no clinics come through, that kind of stuff. So the only teaching gig I could get was teaching English, because they really want foreign English teachers. They love foreign English teachers here, because everybody wants to learn English, and they want to get the dialect correct. They want to pronounce it properly.
It's funny because my backstory. If I were asked the same question, my answer would be pretty similar, because I remember, and I've told this story before, also on YouTube. I was teaching one of my cousins how to read when I was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he was 5 or 4 years old, something like that. And this has always been, it's always been there. And I remember thinking as I was growing up, like, when people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't say teacher. It's not that big of a cliche, but what I said was, I think anything. Meaning that I knew that I could learn anything. That wasn't really a big issue for me to decide. And it was always there, that awareness that teaching and learning, of course, in parallel, are there to serve us, right? And those skills are what matters to develop.
That's interesting, because I also felt at a very young age that I could really do anything I want. That if I liked what it was, if I really wanted to do it, I loved it, I could do it. It didn't matter what it was. And I was also into teaching myself. I was autodidactic. I did very badly in school. I had very bad experiences with established institutional education. And I never really wanted to get involved in an institution because of that. And so all of the learning that I did, not only music learning, but I'm talking about sociology and science, and and I'm pretty well read. I'm pretty rounded educationally. I did it all on my own. I taught it to myself by just picking up books and reading and thinking. And so teaching is a special talent. I think you're born with, or I guess you're not. I mean, it's separate from playing music. It has its own thing, and that was there before music was there. My love of reading was there before I discovered drums. I used to go to the library every week and take out the maximum amount of books they'd let me take out when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I would read 3, 4, 5 books a week.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I always say that my worst enemy is Amazon. It kills my bank account, man.
Well, the internet, the information available on the internet is insane. I mean, you can really, literally. I went to colleges. I went to MIT and looked at some of their video courses that they recorded. Some of the physics stuff came from online videos from major schools, and it's free. It's unbelievable what's available. If you really want to learn, it's very easy now to learn what it is you want. But the trick is to want to learn.
I was going to ask you what your thoughts are on the current state of education, and we don't need to confine ourselves to music education, but by all means, take it however you want. But
I'm an American, so my point of view on education is an American point of view, and education in America today is not good. It's not promoted well. First of all, it's very expensive. A good education is out of reach for most people, unless you are wealthy, and it's not directed at middle class or lower class people who need it the most. It's not a very useful system to me, to our society, and it's being used against us in a lot of ways. Even when you do get it to school, I always felt that they were teaching to the lowest common denominator, and also it was an indoctrination series. It wasn't about learning anything that you wanted to learn. It was about teaching you how to go along with things and not to be a problem, and being a good employee, doing your job and not asking questions and all of that. I mean, it was more connected to industry and industry's needs and the employment that industry required, and the kind of behavior patterns and thinking, that corporations needed to have in their employeeship. People were willing to follow not such great leaders, or not ask questions, or just do what you're told and compete. And everything was about the bottom line was about making more profit, making more money. And the cultural values really suffered greatly. And I think this is what the school system that was created was created by the Rockefellers.
Mm-hmm.
The Rockefeller Foundation was back in the 40s and 50s when this whole thing was starting to be put together. They wanted to make sure that they were in control of it and got what they needed from it, and also avoided what they didn't want. So big money has controlled the education in America. I'm not sure how it is in England or on the landmass of Europe. I know being in China, education is very highly regarded here and very highly encouraged. I'm living with a university teacher, and her father was a principal of a high school. So what I get from the teaching community here is that they're very well respected, and what they do is very wanted. And young kids are sent to teach. I have a 4-year-old taking English lessons with me, a 7-year-old taking English lessons with me. People want their children to learn. I have two twin nephews. They're taking piano lessons. They're 5 years old. They're taking piano lessons once a week. They take an art class once a week. 5 years old, But this is where the parents are at. They want their two children exposed to arts and education, and they give them as much opportunity to learn as possible as early as they can get involved in it, which is the total opposite of what I find in the United States.
Yeah, I was gonna fill in that gap by telling you that in Europe it is not all that different. I think socially speaking and economically speaking is a little bit more accessible, as it's common knowledge. Education is cheaper and it's socially financed, right? So like my taxes do go towards education of other people. But from a mindset standpoint, we shouldn't get too excited because it's not all that different. That what I feel, for example, and I lived in Europe. I was born in Portugal, and now I live in England. So the European culture, I understand it fairly well. And by the way, just to add even more context, my entire family for the past 3 generations are all teachers. So there's something going on here in the blood. What I see is that ease of access backfires because people don't really care that much. They already know they are going to college. They already know they are going to university. They know that. It's a given. So they go there, they wander around, they get their diploma, and then they go and work for McDonald's because they don't know what to do with it.
So the difference here is not so much the availability and price of the education, but the cultural valuation of education. The difference here is it's a much more social culture. It's not about, I don't know, it's becoming more and more capitalized, more and more here. There's a lot of money being made and being invested. But before that, it was an agricultural country, and it was more about taking care of family and taking care of people than anything else until recently. So I think they have a head start on the education thing. The way they value education is not so much as a career extension, but as just a thing that you need to know. Just the knowing is valuable, not just being able to make money.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, and in my opinion, and this is where we can definitely exchange some thoughts, because in my opinion, and my biggest beef with education, hence why I started this series of conversations, is that I want to poke that I want to talk about that difficult subject, and I know that a lot of teachers, including some that I've spoken to, they're not comfortable talking about how they know that they are not doing the best job they could do, and they too are just riding the wave and trying to, as you mentioned earlier, just to make a living. And hopefully these conversations make those people uncomfortable and get them to do a little bit more, even if it's just out of guilt. I don't care. I want them to start doing something.
There are too many teachers that are not qualified, that are making money.
Yes, I agree, and that's gonna eventually lead us towards the next question or chapter, if you will, of this conversation, which is the fact that online education, and by online education, now I'm gonna maybe stay within the YouTube lane, how it allowed so many people to teach, and I'm doing air quotes now, drum lessons without ever having taught a drum lesson in their lives in person. Like, they just turn on the camera and here's the lick of the week. Surely this is a drum lesson. And,
Yeah. Well, that's not really drum lessons. I mean, they're not teaching any fundamentals. They're like teaching a monkey how to eat a banana. Instead of teaching the monkey how to grow a banana.
Mm-hmm. No, that's right. I hear it's like that saying. If you want to, I forget now how it goes, but I'm going to paraphrase the saying. But if you want to teach a man how to survive, teach them how to fish. Don't give them a fish, something like that, right?
Right.
And it really is my personal mindset behind education is all about engagement and getting the students to answer the questions themselves and just keep a hand on the helm, but allow them to navigate their own understanding of things, and in drumming or otherwise. Like I said, my parents are both teachers, non-music teachers. My mom was a science teacher, and my dad still teaches. He's an architect, and so I've always seen this, right? I've always seen my parents asking questions, and for me that was perfectly normal. And then as I meet more teachers and then later become a teacher, I see that most teachers don't ask questions. They just pour all this, I'm going to say information, but that might be a polite word for it, but pour all this data on their students and then just expect them to make sense out of it. And like you said earlier, I too believe that it's been, there's an agenda behind the way we've changed how education works, and definitely corrupted education in Europe as well, not only in the States, with the same mentality. Like, we're not teaching you how to think about your field of expertise. We're teaching you how to get out of here, go get a job, work for the man, get your salary, and that's it. Including, unfortunately, which is that's a painful one for us, I guess, including in the music education field, where people are just taught to play those licks, those grooves. You go home and that's it.
I have to tell you that was one of my experiences in Julliard. Was when I realized that my teacher saw his job, and he was a great man, and he was a father figure. But he saw his job as preparing his students to be able to get a job, to pass an audition, and get a job when they graduate. That was his object. And when I would go to him and ask him how should I stick a certain passage, he would look at me and say, "I'll play with one hand if you got it." I said, "Can you think the conductor knows which hands you're using?" Because if it sounds like what it looks like in the music to him, he's going to be fine. That was the attitude, is if you make the conductor happy, and the conductor knows shit about drums, but you make the conductor happy, that's when I had to get out of classical music.
It's a tough one. Like, I guess this is an issue across the board and transversal to all sorts of genres, if you will, because one thing here in England, I don't know, I'm not familiar with if this is a thing in the States, but here in England there's a culture of scoring the skill or ranking the skill of a student. So in other words, they always work towards the grade, right? So if you get the grade, you know how to play. that it's an automatic synonym of skill. Which is not true at all. I get students here all the time who tell me, like, I've got a grade 5 out of 8, which is the curriculum, the standard curriculum here. I've got a grade 5 in drums, and I ask them to play, I don't know, a paradiddle. And they don't even know how to position their hands, let alone how to play a paradiddle smoothly and fluently. It breaks my brain. Like, how did you go up the ranking ladder if you can't even hold your sticks properly?
No, because you're looking at text. You're not looking at ability.
Yeah. And
you could be very smart on paper and not be able to do anything.
Yeah, and again, I blame and that's what I tell these students. Like, I blame your previous teacher, because this guy was getting you up the ranking. Just for his own benefit, because there's a side of business, shady business here that we don't need to discuss necessarily, but there is, and it's why so many of these teachers, music teachers in this case, are so motivated to just get the students to do those exams, because they have a financial, let's call, benefit to it.
And also the parents see that as improvement. If they see their getting higher grades or getting good marks in school, they believe that's a sign of good improvement. But music is not like that. Music is it's a one-on-one. It's a craft that's being handed from one person to another. You can't judge it like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one to unwash those brains that they come here to me and ask for grades for their students, and I'm like, well, I think, and this is literally what I tell these parents, and I'm just gonna put it out there, so hopefully other music teachers feel inspired to say the same thing, because I know that I have a kind of personality. I don't really ask for permission to say what I think, but a lot of people need that kind of permission. Like, oh, if that guy said it, screw it, I'll say it as well. I tell the parents there are only 2 grades that are valuable for your kid to take, which is 5 and 8. And there's actually a practical reason for that. It's not just a random number. Those 2 grades actually give them in England, give them points, so that when they apply for university, it supports their applications. Let's not waste time. So let's look at that from that standpoint, and that's fine. When this student can do a grade 8, we'll do both within 6 months. 5 and 8 out of the way. Until then, don't worry about it. That's what I tell all these parents. Stop worrying about getting them graded and examined and X-rayed, all this bullshit. It doesn't matter. They have to focus on the fundamentals.
What we should be doing, what we should be creating out of the student, the test of the student is not a grade. It's how someone else in an orchestra feels about playing with them. That's really what the object is for me to make a student that's going to go and play in a band, and the people in the band are going to say, wow, it's really a pleasure to play with you. That's really the goal. And that goal isn't served by institutional thought. It's serving something else.
No, I mean, when I think of a student like Billy Martin, right? I'm familiar with Billy's playing. When you see someone like Billy playing, and you can tell that he has no, what's the word? He's got no fear of just exploring and experimenting with his own ideas. And that, I mean, knowing, and I read a little bit on your relationship with Billy and vice versa, I mean, that came from somewhere. And that mindset is what it is, right? Like, he was told, it's okay, just do it, right? And I was told that as well, fortunately. But just do whatever the hell you want and make it sound good. make your bandmates happy.
I did some things to Billy that were very frightening. I threw him into situations that he felt were way above his head, you know, and challenged him very early in his career. I played with in very important situations. You know, I put him in the pit of a Broadway show when he was 16.
Wow.
I put him on stage. Yeah, it's a big one. I put him out there on stage playing with some of the best players in New York. You know, in a Bob Fosse show, and he was scared hell. He told me later on. He said he didn't think he could do that. And the only reason he tried was because he thought that I thought he could do it. So he figured I thought he could do it. Then he should try. And he did great. But that's what really gave him the confidence to go out there and be himself and do what he does. That courage. You know, and that had nothing to do with paradiddles. It had nothing to do with reading. Well, what it had to do with was having faith in someone and believing in them and teaching them to believe in themselves. That's really the biggest lesson.
What do you think is the difference between a teacher and a mentor? Because I feel like asking that question now.
Well, that's a difficult question. I guess a mentor is a mentor lasts for a lifetime. I mean, it's not just somebody you go to for a couple of lessons or you study with for a year or two. A mentor is somebody you follow your whole life and that you use as a role model and that you consult with. You know, it's like my mentor was Joe Morello. I mean, I first saw him play when I was 16. Was the first time I saw him play. The first time I was able to get a drum lesson with him, I was like 25, and I continued to take lessons with him until 6 months before he died. I had a lesson 6 months before he died. I wouldn't go every week. I mean, in the beginning, I would go every week, and I did that for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever. And then after a while, he told me, he says, "Listen, you know what to do. You don't have to come back to me every week. You know what you got to work on." And but every so often, whenever I hit a wall, whenever I got myself to another level of understanding, I would go back to him and show him what I was doing and ask him questions again, over and over again, all throughout the years. It wasn't that, I went to him for a year and a half and I learned what he got to show me and I'm good. I got what I needed from him. No, I look to him for encouragement and advice and, my whole life until he wasn't here, and I'd still be doing it if he was still here. He didn't leave us. I would still be going to him and asking him questions and asking him to look at my hands and asking him what he thinks. And, all these new concepts that are coming up of my own, I would present them to him and ask him whether he thought I was crazy or not, or maybe I'm doing the wrong thing in this stuff. But that's what a mentor is to me. It's not just somebody who's going to give you lessons or teach you how to do something. It's somebody you're going to look up to. That's a role model that you're going to compare yourself to forever. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and that seems to be a common thread amongst everyone that I've been talking to, is that they have one or two or more, but one or two definitely mentors in their lives that really shifted their mindsets. Not their playing necessarily, but their minds. There was something in their minds that clicked, right, whenever they met and interacted with those people. Actually, I was talking the other day with Daniel Glass, and I posted that podcast today, so it's live today. And we talked, of course, about Freddy Gruber, and then I brought up the fact that you had a conversation with Daniel Glass about Freddy Gruber, and Daniel spent maybe 45, 50 minutes only talking about what he learned, I guess, from a mindset standpoint from Freddy, and that was it. Like, for him as well, that click moment when you meet that character, it's not even a person anymore. It just becomes this entity that really conditions everything you do from then on. And it's interesting that there's always someone, right? whenever for Billy Martin, that was you. For you, that was Joe Morello. I have my set of a list of mentors that also helped me from a mindset standpoint, that told me, like, you know what, it's okay. Go on, go fail, go be crazy. It's gonna be okay. And what do you think is, I guess, let me see, because this question might sound a little bit weird, but this is something that I'm concerned about as an educator, to somehow, I'm concerned, not in a bad way, but I'm curious rather, as to how one can, maybe teach is not a good word for this, but share with the student how they can pursue that click moment. Because I get students asking me, like, they ask me this more often than I would like, because I'm uncomfortable with the question, because I don't know the answer. Because they ask me, I've never felt that click, and how can I find that click, like that click moment in my life that gives me that boost in confidence?
Wow, I mean, that's I don't know how to answer that either. I mean, that's that's like finding your passion. I mean, you really can't be good at anything until you find your passion. That's when you're going to be great. That's what I tell people, that they find they don't know what to do with their life. They go into school, but they don't know what they want to be. And I said, you have to do what you love. That's don't do what people tell you to do. Don't do what they teach you in school. You have to do what you love, and you know what you love when you find your passion, and that's what you follow, and that you'll never go wrong. But I don't know how to tell people how to find their passion. I don't know how to do that. That's a very personal experience, and everybody, I guess, does it in their own way. Many people don't ever find it. I know a lot of older people that went through their whole life just doing a job, and their passion was their family or raising their kids or whatever, but there was never a thing that was just theirs. So I think you have to be lucky, even to find your passion. But how do you look for it? That's where education comes in. You have to learn as much as you can until what your passion is strikes you, and then that's when you know what to do, and that's when you can focus your education clearly. But you have to generally learn everything you can about everything, and expose yourself to as much as possible. Hopefully, something will trigger that passion in you, and then you'll know what to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other day, I wrote something down that went along the lines of in between passion and rewards lives knowledge, because a lot of people feel like I meet. Well, I can give you the example of my partner, actually, because she's always told me that she's passionate, and now I'm going to use that word a little bit loosely here, but she's passionate about a lot of things. She's kind of the opposite, right? She has this curiosity about life and the world, and she gets overwhelmed, because then she understands, okay, but I need to dedicate time to something, and then she doesn't know what to pick. And I answered, like, look, it's knowledge. You got to go acquire the knowledge. Trust me, once you start studying, 5, 6 of those passions, again, air quotes here, 5 out of those 6 will be boring eventually. Right? You start digging into the nitty gritty stuff, and you start going like, okay, now I've lost interest. I like the superficial, flashy stuff, but this is too much work. And if it feels like too much work, it's definitely not your passion.
Passion is not work.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I agree with you. It's love. Yeah, I agree. And again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, I'm still unsure as to. Well, maybe I'm not that unsure, but for a while I was very unsure as to I couldn't answer the question, should I be a musician or not? And I was being a musician, if you know what I mean already. I was playing live, I was doing gigs, I was teaching as well, but I was doing the musician's stuff, right? I was recording with bands and none of that, well, that was work. That felt like work all the time. I was just like, and then I would, sit down with a student and see those things happen that we know, that as teachers we know exactly what that feels like when you start seeing the students' eyes opening up and they have those small epiphany moments or big epiphanies sometimes, when they finally see the stick bounce for the first time and it was actually rebound and not just their wrist trying to fake it. That's it. That for me wasn't work. I could do that for another 5 hours with the same guy. And I started to ask those questions, like, because I was always told, and just to kind of put a bow on that idea, I was always told that a musician is supposed to be playing. You should be playing with everyone. One of my teachers used to tell me all the time, say yes to everything.
No, that's true. I mean, if you want to make a living, you have to say yes to everything. You can't say no to anything. You have to be able to do everything, and you have to accept everything.
But that's the thing. Like for me, there was just an ordeal. Like I was saying yes to everything that I didn't want to do.
Well, I think here's the trick, because I've been through that. I never made a decision to be a musician. As a matter of fact, people try to talk me out of being a musician as a young kid. They said you would never make a living and all that. And I said, I laughed at them. I said, I don't care about that. I want to play music. I love music. Then when I got into the business and I started making money, I started evaluating my position in the business by how much money I was making. And I got attached to that. And that's what made me angry about my passion, was that I became less passionate. I lost my passion for playing. I mean, I started not playing well because I didn't care as much. I cared more about the gig than I cared about the level of my playing, and that's one of the reasons I quit. I realized that I wasn't having fun anymore. This is not why I got into the business. I got into playing music. And one of the mistakes that I made was that I didn't spend as much time on projects that didn't require money, that were just creative projects that I did for love, to have an outlet for my passion, for playing music, rather than doing everything only because it paid money. And that's the mistake. I mean, you have to do everything if you want to make a living, but you cannot forget about doing things for free that you do for love. You got to keep your passion going at the same time. And I gave it up for making a living. I traded one for the other, and it really drove me into a dead end, and I had to leave. I had to leave before people started realizing that I wasn't passionate anymore.
Now, I understand that to an extent anyway. Fundamentally, for different but I guess the same reasons. And I've spoken about this publicly as well. But last year I had an episode of burnout, and I spent 3-4 months. Perhaps more, but anyway, 4 months were very, very difficult. I got to a point that, well, I didn't want to teach, and that for me was a red flag. Like something is really not right in my brain. I really, really didn't want to teach. Like I was hating every single one of my lessons. I was inside my head all the time. I wasn't being able to engage and interact with the students properly. Everything was kind of sort of an out-of-body experience, because I would finish the day and I would feel like, I think I taught fine, nothing horrible happened, we achieved things, but I'm miserable as I can be. And then I realized the first 6 months of 2017 were for me when I made the decision of I have to change my mindset about this, because I was becoming, when I opened this school, when I'm recording this podcast, everything became about the bills every single day. It was a shift, because I never worried about that before. I worried to an extent, but it was fine. And adding to that, I had a child in 2016, so that added more pressure. And really the first 6 months of 2017 were a brain detox process. I was just so intoxicated by the idea of bills, and then as it goes, when you start a business, I went into debt, so that even everything spiraled out of control, right?
Exactly what I was talking about. Exactly what happened to me. I wouldn't open my stick bag unless somebody was writing a check. You have to feed your heart. You can't stop feeding your heart, because your heart is what drives the rest of it. If you forget about your heart, then everything else is going to break down eventually. You're going to crash. I crashed.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's a tough one to manage, and that's why I started talking about that publicly. Last year, I posted a video. I believe I called it "Let's Talk About Burnout," and that was it. I just basically told the story of how something that I was passionate for since the day I remember thinking suddenly became this, not just a job, but it was really like, I felt like every day that I was working for someone else, which was kind of a weird conflict, because I wasn't, so I couldn't even blame anyone.
Like you were.
Yeah, no, I know, but like I felt like I had this boss, this bigger than me person, which was me, and yes, my students, but like I felt like I was coming into work because I had to, not because I wanted to, and that wasn't why I opened.
That's a bad situation.
Yeah.
And you have to avoid that by remaining, by continuing to do things that give you pleasure, even if you have to do things that don't at times. But if you stop doing things that give you pleasure, you just do the things that you have to do, and you don't do things that give you pleasure and feed your passion, you absolutely will get into trouble with yourself.
Well, and that's why this podcast exists.
Yeah.
Because I want to enjoy myself talking to people who know more than me for at least an hour a week. And having said that, I want to ask you, because this is something that I've been asking everyone, because I guess it's a preoccupation of mine. What are your thoughts on the future of education? So we've discussed the state of education at the moment, but how do you think that we can steer this back into something a little bit more beneficial to the student and less about the teacher?
Wow, that's a really difficult task, because of the internet, and because of YouTube, and because of the institutional mindset, it all works against us. And really, what we're talking about is one-on-one teaching, inspiring an individual, yourself, so that they learn what it is to be passionate, and learn what it is to want to learn, to inspire people to learn. That comes from personal contact. And everything we talk about, the internet and YouTube, it's all designed about non-personal contact. It's the opposite of what should happen. How do we change that? I don't know if we can. I really don't know if we can make it more important to have personalized one-on-one lessons than to take lessons online. I don't know how to compete with that. First of all, it's just you and I against the rest. It seems like the rest of the world. There must be a couple other teachers out there that feel this way, but I think we're greatly outnumbered and out-resourced by what exists today. Because there's so many DVDs, so many videos, so many online lessons for free, or even if you pay for some, they're very inexpensive. $5, $10, $15 a month. It's really, it really depends on the student to understand and want to know and want to experience a real teacher and a real lesson. You know, and I don't know how to convey that to people without them experiencing it personally with me. I tell people about it, and some people agree with me. They agree, and then they say, "But I can't afford to fly to New York." Or, you know, and that's what I tell everybody. I said, they asked me if I teach. I said yes, and they asked me, well, how do I teach? And I said the best way is one-on-one. If you can't do one-on-one, then Skype is the next level. Not as good. If you can't do Skype, then there's a bunch of videos I could show you that I did. That's not as good as, you know, Skype because it's not interactive. And then there's, you know, DVDs, which, you know, are not focused on an individual's needs or talent. You know, that's what I tell them. I said, my preference is for you to come here to see me and be with me so that I can touch you and you could touch me and I can walk around you, you know, and I can touch your arm and I can put your hand on my arm and tell you what to feel from what I'm doing. I can't do that in Skype. In a video, I can't respond to what your particular needs are because at least I can do that much in Skype. I can't do that in a video. But still, some of them say, look, there's no good teachers in my neighborhood, in my area. They live somewhere in the Midwest. There aren't any good teachers. And they can't afford to, you know, move to New York or fly in for lessons. You know, would I teach them on Skype? And of course I say, yes, I will. That's, you know, that's the next best thing. But the way the world is set up now, it's just there's too many other resources of lesser value and of lesser cost to compete with. And the mindset of most kids are, you know, and they're studying multiple methods. This is one of my pet peeves, is that they're studying multiple methods from multiple teachers with multiple DVDs, which I think is completely wrong. You need to focus on one way of doing things and mastering it, and then go on to another way of doing it and mastering that, and mastering these one at a time in order, not to try to work on 5 different things at the same time, because one thing actually is detrimental to something else that you're working on. You know, it's not that any of these things are bad. It's just that, you know, you need to master whatever it is you're working on before you move on to something else. You know, and I see a lot of these kids with a half a dozen DVDs because all of these drummers are great, and a lot of them even have good methodology. But it's very eclectic. It's not focused study. It's very, very difficult to get great that way. I mean, you really have to have focus, you know, and patience, and be willing to wait. You know, so that's one of my pet peeves is the multiple methodology that goes on. There's a lot of ways to do things. You can't do them all at the same time. They're all good for something.
It's like in physics, as you well know. My grandfather was a physicist, and in physics, there's a lot of ways things can go wrong, and there's one way things can go right. And
that's right.
It's not all that different. You know, maybe we can acknowledge a couple of exceptions, but it's not all that different when it comes to education. One of my pet peeves when it comes to online education, that's why I have this pressing issue that I'm constantly nagging people about. And I've had interesting interactions with people, and I'm not going to name names because these were in private, but with people who are heavily involved in the online education business, and one of the things that I've heard was, and this one was a trigger for me. I had to shut that conversation down immediately because I knew that from then on I wouldn't be able to reason with them, and that would be my fault. But I heard these words, "we as service providers," and I was like, okay, we're done. Because this is just, I can't continue this conversation. Like, now I'm gonna go into insult mode because you're insulting me by saying something like that. And then labeling yourself, your public persona is, I'm a teacher, but then in private you assume it and admit it that, no, I'm just providing a service. And the client is always right. And in context that, in a different context, that term service provider wouldn't be a problem. In that context of what this person was saying, it was very much like I might as well be selling sausages. Doesn't make a difference. The client is always right.
Yeah. Yeah, then business is business.
And that for me is one of my pet peeves when it comes to how we are managing this whole online education situation, which I don't have, let's say, a conceptual problem with it. Like, I appreciate the access to information. I appreciate that, if it is easier for someone, like you said, in the Midwest or in Africa or in the middle of China to access having lessons with Alan Herman or Billy Martin or whoever, then awesome, so be it. But we need to have some sort of at least ethical regulation here going on, because it's just spiraling out of control, in my opinion, where, like...
Well, there's too many teachers out there that are not highly qualified to teach. That's the problem. The field is overcrowded with under-talented people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then the other aspect of it that I'm concerned about, but I do have perhaps an optimistic approach to it, is the fact that it's one-sided, right? Like, the person shoots a video, it goes on YouTube, and that's the end of that. The student might get it, might not get it. It seems to be off the teacher's backs as soon as it's uploaded. And of course, that's not the teaching or the teacher's job. The teacher's job is to expose and then follow up and then question it, challenge it, work on application, etc., etc. Hopefully, the internet will evolve enough to allow for the two-sided relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to do that. Your question is impossible for me to answer. I don't see a way out of this, unfortunately.
No, I see that, and all my optimism, by the way, is at this point merely speculative. I'm hopeful, but I'm also studying and dabbling into artificial intelligence, and that's why some of these issues might be not solved, but at least tweaked, and we can perhaps manage this a little bit better. Because, like yourself, I don't see online the education for the masses, if you will, to go anywhere. I think it's just going to grow, which is why we need to be even more concerned about it.
It's become a big business. There's many more music students now than there used to be. The business has grown tremendously in terms of numbers. The quality is what is lacking, though. It doesn't keep pace with the growth of the business, And maybe it's that there's not that many people that are really that passionate or that interested in doing it at the best level, at the highest level possible. There was a time when there was no other way to do it. Back in the 40s, the 30s and 40s, if you wanted to play music, you had to go see a master. There was no other way to approach it. Now, you can go through your whole life and never have met or talked to a master.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's sad, and it seems to me that as we speak today, education has been diluted, and now one-on-one education is kind of a niche market, and it's premium. It's a premium kind of service, which it is.
Well, yeah, it's niche because it's small. I mean, you can only reach one person at a time, whereas online you can reach hundreds, thousands. I mean, there's a lot more money to be made that way in numbers, just by the sheer numbers of it. But when we teach, how many students a week can you teach comfortably and stay focused? It's there's a very small limit to how much that can be done. Whereas if you teach online, you can have 500 students and spend 2 or 3 hours a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean it's almost appealing, but then I remember what that does to the students.
Well, the quality of the teaching suffers greatly. Yeah, I mean it's about whether you're into making the money or you're about making the students into musicians. That's really what it comes down to. What do you care about? You care about developing artists, or do you care about making money? There's two different ways to approach things. What you're doing is trying to find a way to do both at the same time, which is very challenging, extremely challenging. And you have to be careful. Like you said, you have to be careful of not burning yourself out by spending too much time on the business part of it and not enough time on the mentoring part.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's exactly what I felt. As I was coming out of that state of mind, and I have my days still. Yesterday was my first day back at work after a 2-week break, and it felt funny again. Like this is something in a bad way, right? Like it felt like, oh, here we are again, back at the grind, and I had to snap myself out of it because that's the state of mind that led me down that road of burnout. It's tough.
You should limit the number of classes you do.
Yeah. It's a tough balance that I need to find.
You need to bring your schedule back. Maybe bring another drum teacher into the school. But you need to balance out the time you spend and not challenge yourself too heavily with this massive students so much. I mean, you have to temper how much you can do and still stay happy.
It's especially moderation. Yeah, you're right. Especially my generation. My generation. I hear a lot the words hustle. You gotta hustle. You gotta grind. I know. Yeah. I know. I had to talk myself out of it because I was one of those people.
Love, baby. That the most important thing in life and in the world is love. If it doesn't have love, it ain't worth anything. Yeah, but it's very hard to convince a lot of younger people that. A lot of people that are into making money. That's true, but that's really the only currency in life is love.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been more and more aware of is that it's the factor of time. That's the other currency that I wasn't really taking into account. I was just burning time, and that led me to.
Well, yeah.
I was doing long hours and all that, but I wasn't doing much most of the time.
Listen, you only have a certain amount of time to be on Earth.
That's true.
What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I don't think I was saying anything, I was just going to need to figure out how you want to spend your time. And the older you get, the less time you have, and the more important it becomes to figure out how to spend that time.
That's right. Wise words.
Yeah, well, I'm old. I've gone through 70 years. I can't believe I did it, but I did. And my mind has changed quite a bit about the things we were talking about over the time, as well.
And you seem to feel more at peace with most things. Is that something that you focused on, or was it just a passage of time that sorted it out?
I think it was just realizing what was important and giving up the things that were hurting me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And concentrating on things that I love. Being able to do what I like to do, not what I have to do.
That's right. Yeah.
Sometimes that's harder for a younger person. When you get older, it gets a little easier.
Well, I'm aiming to get there rather sooner than later. But yeah, I'm 31 years old and I have a not even 2 years old son. So there's still quite a bit of heat under my pants.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure. Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on me. Yeah. I don't have to worry about such things.
But
well, this is great talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I appreciate that. I was actually going to ask you for the last two questions, which are very direct, and they will not allow for, well, let's see what happens, but supposedly they don't allow for a lot of long answers. The first one is, what sort of advice would you give out to anyone who wants to start teaching?
I would say make sure you know your subject, and don't ask your students to do anything you couldn't do. You have to be able to do it and show it to them and understand. If you don't understand it, you can't explain it. So you better know your topic, and you better practice your skills so that you can explain what you're doing and you can demonstrate it.
I agree. It's good advice. I had the. This might be a funny one. I might send you the link to this, and if you have the time, you can have a look at this. I had well, I wouldn't call him a student, but I had a person to come into my studio maybe 4 months ago. He was an adult, past his 40s, and he told me that he wanted to become a drum teacher, right? And I said, okay, so come and see me on so day, and we'll sit down, we'll talk, and if I can help you, if I can give you some sort of guidance, I will. Cool. So he shows up, and it wasn't good. So he he didn't know his stuff, first and foremost, and he spent effectively half an hour saying that first of all, nothing really worked for him. Like the way I had my classroom set up, like this is why I can't so you can see what kind of person we're talking about here, right? The drum set didn't have 4 toms, only had 3, so he couldn't really show the stuff. And then I asked him, okay, but teach me anything you want. Look around you, pick a topic, because I asked him to teach me something, because then I could help him, fine tune the process. And then he told me immediately, he says, well, but I didn't bring my double pedal. And I respond, well, but I didn't ask for a lesson on double pedal. Your first question should be, where are you at? What are you working on? And he became very agitated, and that didn't end well. I'm sharing this story, this anecdote, because I shared the video of that lesson. Of course, I hid the person's identity, but I shared that lesson online. Because I really wanted people to see, like, look, this is more real than what you think. There are people every day making the decision of becoming a drum teacher who are exactly in the same position this guy is. They see a window of opportunity. I'm going to make a buck. And, whatever. I'll just teach whatever the hell I feel like teaching that day. And the students will have to go home and eat it. Even if they don't want to learn that, doesn't matter. Just learn double pedal. And
I have to, so I have to add something to my previous response to you, to what should we tell drum teachers, because this fits right in with what you're talking about. Aside from knowing your stuff and being able to execute it, you have to have the ability to find out what the student wants and what the student wants to learn, and how the student learns, and adjust yourself to be able to teach what is wanted, and in a way that will be communicated well and taken in by the student. Aside from having all that other skill and all that other experience, the ability to empathize with somebody, to empathize with how they feel and with what they want is very important, because if you're not giving them what they want, you're not going to have a good a successful relationship.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And one of the things that I guess that got reinforced by being the witness of I was having an out of body experience during that lesson. I didn't get I was just so mind blown by his cluelessness. He was just so lost. Like, if that guy were to take a student, I don't know, I think the world would be a worse place. I'm just gonna put it that way. If that person were to teach, the world would become a worse place immediately.
Right? I think you wasted your time with him.
No, hopefully I didn't, because at the end he told me, I don't think I want to be a drum teacher anymore. And that's actually...
maybe you did a good thing. Maybe you didn't waste your time.
He actually, at the end, and that's in the video, you can hear his voice in the background. He says, I'm glad I came here. This is the wrong thing for me.
Well, obviously, it wasn't passion that drove him to you to find out.
No, yeah, he came to me because what he wanted, and that's the funniest bit, I believe. What he wanted was, I believe that it was twofold. He perhaps wanted a job,
yeah,
and he wanted me to tell him how to go get a diploma that would certify him as a drum teacher. And I was like, dude, you're so all over the shop.
Like, to go to drum business school.
Yes, exactly. So there you go. I wanted to share that story because it goes right to that idea that, if we don't know what we're doing, and if we don't have a true why for why, well, excuse the redundancy, but for why we are doing what we do, then stay home, man. Don't go teach anyone. It's just, it's really dangerous. And unfortunately, YouTube takes away that pressure, because YouTube, you set up your smartphone, you shoot a drum lesson, and no one tells you, hey man, shut up. Don't, what are you doing?
It's very impersonal. Yeah, the other thing that I do sometimes too is that when I feel that I can't give the student what he's looking for, sometimes they honestly can convey what they want to work on, and it's not something that I'm good at. I will let them go. I will say, listen, I think I'm not the guy you want to study with. It's not for what you want to do.
No, that's it. I think the ultimate goal of a teacher should be to see their students graduate as quickly as possible, as I call it. I'm always trying to get rid of my good students. That's what I tell them.
Yeah, you need a better teacher.
Last one. What would you consider a good quote to live by?
Oh boy, good quote to live by?
It can be two if you want, or none. Doesn't matter.
Follow your heart.
Follow your heart. That's a good one.
Which is not a quote of mine. It's a quote of a philosopher. But, it inspires me. Follow your heart.
Well, I don't think anyone owns any quotes at this point, so there you go. But thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I really mean that. I've been actually, I was supposed to share this at the beginning, but then I didn't. The first time, so I'll close with this one. The first time I heard of you and saw you was again, ironically, via YouTube, but in a very peculiar, and perhaps that's why it was attractive. And in retrospective, when I think about it, at the time I don't think I saw it that way. But you were teaching a student. I believe his name was Jake. I want to say Jake. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Jake Field.
There you go. That's it. And you were teaching the student, so it was effectively a one-on-one lesson. And I had never seen anything like that on YouTube. Maybe I didn't look deep enough, but anyway, it just so happened.
That's one of the early ones I did. It's very early.
And I was just like, not only the way you were teaching, and then I saw the improvements, and that video was like 9 minutes long, by the way. So it wasn't really
Jake wasn't even my student.
So that was what, Matt Patela's student?
I was Matt's student, and it was Matt's idea to have me do a live online lesson, and he asked Jake to come over and take a lesson from me. It was Matt's idea.
Those 9 minutes, and I kid you not, those 9 minutes changed my hand technique. Because that was the first, and I'll tell you why. That was the first time I ever saw anyone describe that pop of the wrist when playing full strokes. I never had that image in my mind, the pop. And now I teach that to all my students. So again, thank you.
Well, I'm going to have to send you another video. I'll send you a more recent one. That's very, very old.
So have you? No, my pleasure. Have you then fine-tuned the approach or the technique itself?
Well, I fine-tuned when I'm teaching. Yeah, the pop of the wrist was just the beginning of that. Now it's more. I got some physics involved with it, and rotational motion, and momentum, and all kinds of other things. There's ways to describe it that are more difficult to understand now.
No, I'm with you. I've watched probably, dozens, if not, definitely dozens of hours of your lessons now, including the long form lessons that you started doing maybe 3 years ago, with the live streams and whatnot. So I'm on it.
All right, you got it then. You've seen it. Well, it's perfectly okay. But it's very, very funny to hear you talk about Jake Fiedler. That's really at the beginning of my online career.
That was the beginning of my knowledge of you. Yeah, that's. I was like, oh my, and especially at the time you still had the big beard and the long hair, so it was a.
Yeah, I was just getting back into playing, so I was hiding behind my hair and beard.
So, Alan, once again, I really appreciate the time. And is there any projects in the future that that you want to plug and promote? I know that you're going back to New York.
Yeah, the Billy's camp, Billy and Cyro's camp this summer in June. You can go to Billy's website, and all the information is there about who's going to be teaching and what the dates are and the location. But it's a lovely location up in the mountains, up New York State mountains. It's very. You can stay. You can get accommodations, or you can bring your tent and camp, and you save money that way. But there's three meals a day that are served, and you get to live with some great players for a week, and hear some great music, and get some great instruction.
Sounds good to me. I'm going to leave a link to Bill's website in the description so people can look it up.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Educational Physics Podcast.
If you would like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and also consider the idea of supporting us via our Patreon account, which is patreon.com/Leeds Music Academy. My name is João Figueiredo, and thank you for listening and learn something today. Take care.